Today I'm going to show you how to sculpt a blob out of clay, make a mold of it, and then cast it in silicone. So first step is to sculpt the clay. I'm using Monster clay. This is not sponsored, but I like this clay a lot. The best way to get it out of this tub is to heat it up a little bit. So I'm going to use this heat gun, heat up the clay and scoop it out, and then once I get a little mound, then I can start sculpting it. Obviously, if you're using a heat gun, be careful for your fingers because it might be really hot. There's better methods for doing this. You can like cut this up and then put it under a heat lamp. But I find that once I get the clay that I need, it stays soft enough while I'm working with it. It'll be a kind of small blob. I want the blob to be able to sit on a table or a desk or whatever once it's made. So I'm just going to put it on here to get a nice blobby shape. I always like to just smooth any cracks, unless you obviously want the crack in your sculpture. But even though the bottom will never be seen and it won't even get molded, it's nicer to just make everything smoother. So you don't need fancy tools to sculpt. Frequently I use popsicle sticks, paintbrush butts, and pencils. So let's see. Kawaii style blob. So I'm purposely sculpting the eyes in a kind of closed position because when I do the silicone, I only want to do one color and I don't want to have to try to fit eyes in there. And I also have figured out a way that if you cut into the silicone later, you can add eyeballs, like plastic eyes. But for right now, and it kind of gives it a little like sad face. You certainly don't need to know anatomy to be able to sculpt a cartoony guy. But it helps to know the general features of the face, like how the chin kind of goes in under the lip and sticks out here, and like the eyeballs go in and kind of go around like this, and I'll smooth that out. And the corners of the mouth go in a little bit. All of this I'll smooth out once I get it roughed in. Once I get all the shapes of the face roughed in, I'll start adding some more detail, and skin texture and things like that. See, we're starting to get somewhere. Nice little face shape. I also always like to add a little butt crack to the blob. You can just go like that. And then smooth it out a little bit. So then when it's sitting on the table, you can be able to just see it. Nothing excessive or anything. You can also sort of push things around. Get a shape that you want. Okay, I think it's time to start detailing. So one of the things you can do to get realistic texture, skin texture, is to take a sheet of plastic. This is like a plastic drop cloth, but you could even use like a plastic bag, like from the grocery store. And then if you put it over your sculpture and you take a pencil and you just poke it, this will give like the idea of pore texture. But what's nice is because you're using this plastic bag, it smooths it out a little bit, and it's not going to make it as rough as if you had just done it with a pencil alone. So that's with the bag. If I had just done the same pressure with the pencil, without the plastic, and with the plastic, and you can see how much more organic it looks with the plastic. It's very subtle and more realistic. And the other thing is, you can use both. You can use the pencil and kind of smooth it out for some deeper things if you want that look, and then you can go over it with this. So there's a lot of options for your blob. I particularly like to put the pores in the little nose zone between the eyes and the mouth, because I feel like that's where humans' pores are the biggest. So that's where the blob should be the most noticeable. You can also use this plastic bag method if you're adding little wrinkles or little lines. You can just, draw them in, and then when you take it off, it's very subtle. But you can see little lines without having big gouges. You can also use a bristly type brush. This brush has stiff bristles. So if you use this and you kind of poke, you can get a nice little pore texture very fast, instead of having to hand do a million dots with a pencil. And you can also brush in at kind of diagonals. Will also give that, like that texture of skin, how it's almost little tiny diamonds. Just going back and forth. This is a paper cup. I'm going to cut the top off, and it's going to be the walls of our mold. I find it to be much easier to use paper cup if your item fits inside it. So we want to make sure that inside the cup there's about an inch around the blob. The hot glue gun is hot, so I'm going to make sure that the blob is in the center, and then I'm going to just spread the hot glue around the edges so that the silicone does not leak out once we pour it. If you don't do this, silicone could just leak out, and then your table is going to be covered with silicone, and you're not going to have a mold. Okay. So this is ready. So now we need to pour the silicone. I'm using Smooth On EcoFlex 30 fast, so it sets in about 10 minutes. This is a really weird tip, but these cups are from Smart and Final. They have a pattern on the outside. Every cup actually has the exact same pattern, so you can use the pattern as a measuring device. So I'll look through the cup, and you can see the pattern, and I'll mark a point where it crosses. There's there's a dark line where the two pieces of paper overlap, and I'll just mark a little mark of how much silicone I think I need. So I put a pencil mark there. Now in this one, if I put a pencil mark where the pattern crosses in the same spot, it's actually the exact same amount. I know it seems crazy, but it works, and I've never had the silicone not set. So this is the silicone that we're using. It's EcoFlex 30 Fast. I poured it into these little containers because I bought it in gallon size, and in the gallon size it's so hard to actually get anything out. So now I'm going to look at the little mark that I made. I'm going to take this and just fill it up to the mark. If you overshoot the mark the first time on side A, then just make sure that you overshoot it on side B. I'm maybe 1 millimeter over it, past the mark that I made. So then I just need to make sure that on this side, also about 1 millimeter over the mark. It's handy to go slow, but I don't have any patience, so. Okay, so the other thing is this silicone is the same silicone we're going to cast it in later. But for the mold, there's no reason to pigment it. So now we have equal parts A and B. We're going to mix them together. You want to make sure that you get all the silicone out of whichever one you're pouring from, because you measured it, and if it's not equal, you might have a problem setting. This is Smooth On. This is not sponsored, but their silicone is very forgiving. I've never had a problem of it not setting. So now I'm going to mix up the silicone. I'm making sure to scrape the walls of the cup and also scrape the bottom like this. That's because you don't want any unmixed parts, part A or B, because then those parts won't set. You want to make sure that everything is uniform, and you can scrape the popsicle stick. So this starts setting about 2 minutes. So you just want to mix for maybe 30 seconds. I'm not being very careful about bubbles. I find with a mold this size, I haven't had any issues with bubbles. Another thing is when you pour over your object, you want to try to pour to the side of your object and let the silicone rise up over it, and that will help reduce the amount of trapped bubbles that might get caught in, say, like a fold of the eye or something. You're not really supposed to do this, but I don't like to waste the silicone, so I'm just gonna scrape the sides. Sometimes if you don't mix well, and if you scrape the sides, you might just get unmixed silicone in there. So you can see it's already starting to set, like the way that it's gelled up like this. It's kind of hard to tell. Like, see how it's already sticky. So it's already starting to set. So that means it'll take about 2 more minutes for it to be, 2 to 5 more minutes to be fully set. And once it's fully set, then we can just make our mold. That's why I like using the fast setting silicone. This silicone is also skin safe, which is why I'm not wearing gloves or anything. You can actually use this on your skin as a makeup. But yeah, so if it gets on your skin and it's mixed, you can just wait for it to set and it'll just peel right off. Otherwise, you can just wash your hands. Okay, so we're gonna let this set, and then we'll unmold it, and we'll make our casting. So the silicone is now set. You can see if I poke it, it's set. So I'm going to peel the plastic off. You can see how easy that was. That's why it's handy to use plastic. We can rip the cup because we don't need the cup anymore. Obviously try not to rip the mold. This silicone is pretty strong. So now you can see, here's our clay guy. So I'm just gonna go back the edges. So the clay guy is safe and sound. It's not, it doesn't get damaged at all. So you can make a mold of, anything really. And you don't have to worry about it getting damaged. So this is our mold. It looks pretty good. When you're casting silicone into silicone, you have a couple options for mold release because silicone sticks to silicone. So if you just put it in without anything, it would definitely stick. And then you just have a solid block of silicone and you would never get it out because it bonds to itself. You can buy a mold release spray, but I find that if it's in kind of a deeper cavity like this, it's hard to get it everywhere, and you can use a paintbrush and spread it around, but I find that it doesn't work. perfectly all the time. So I usually just use petroleum jelly. It's kind of weird and gross, but it's very quick and easy. So I just put it inside. And also make sure you put it on the top, because anywhere that silicone falls on this, it will stick to it permanently unless it has a mold release. So I put way too much in here. Once you put it on, you can really scrape off most of the petroleum jelly. You just need a really thin layer, and you don't want to lose all the detail that you put in. You can also take petroleum jelly and thin it with odorless mineral spirits, and that will really make a nice thin mold release for you, but I don't have that on hand. And this is easier, I think, and a little safer. So now I'm going to fill these up. This is side B. I'm just estimating how much silicone I need. If you want to be super precise, you can pour water into the mold and then pour it into a cup, and that way you'll know the exact volume of silicone that you'll need. I really prefer to just eyeball it. So now we have side A and B, and this time I'm going to pigment one side of the silicone, so it's going to have a kind of fleshy color. So this is specific silicone pigment, which needs to be mixed up. It looks kind of nasty. You really do not need very much of this, especially if you want to keep the translucency in the silicone. So you can see here how this is silicone with zero pigment, and it really is translucent. Skin obviously is not that translucent, but you don't want to lose all of it. So I'm actually going to kind of scrape off most of the pigment from the stick, and then when I put it in, you'll see that that's still a pretty good amount of pigment. So this is flocking fiber. It's like very tiny cut up pieces of yarn, essentially. It's very fine, it's very soft. People seem to think that it's gonna feel like fiberglass. It doesn't, it feels like yarn. So I'm just gonna put like a pinch in there, a fresh stick. And now when I mix this up, you'll see it's a little bit redder. And the big thing is that it adds like a tiny, tiny dots of red inside. So just like real skin, you know, you have a lot of different colors in your skin. So adding flocking kind of fakes that in the silicone. And you can also, you can add like blue and white and yellow, because there's a lot of colors in skin. This is mainly trying to fake like the blood capillaries and stuff like that. So now that I have this side all mixed up, I'm going to pour it into this side. And like I said before, you want to scrape the cup to get all that silicone, because you measured it out equally. If you don't get it all out, it's not going to be equal anymore. So now we have the two sides, we're going to mix them up. Make sure you scrape the edges. Have about 2 minutes. I think 30 seconds of mixing is more than enough. Good to scrape the popsicle stick, scrape the edges, try to scrape the bottom of the cup. just going to pour this in. If you pour from a height, it makes a thin stream and it helps pop bubbles on the way down. So I'm just pouring this in. I'm letting gravity move the silicone where it needs to be. Filling this up. And I don't want it to overflow because I want it to sit flat on the table. There we go. Okay, in about 3 minutes I'll be set and ready. So the silicone is set. It's only been about 2 minutes. So this is what I like about fast setting silicone. Some silicone takes 4 hours, 24 hours to set. But when you're trying to get things done quickly, it's nice to have fast setting. So you can see, it came out quite well. Pretty fleshy. Pretty close to my skin tone actually. Could have put a little white in there, I guess. So there we go. So now this blob, there's a lot of options now that you've cast your blob. Oh, and by the way, this is like a nice squishy silicone, which is fun to play with, to like put it on things. And you can see all of the detail that we captured with the silicone mold. So once you finish casting your blob, you can, well, it's covered in petroleum jelly, so you want to wash it with like dish detergent to get all that petroleum jelly off, because right now it's it's greasy feeling. But then once you have it nice and clean, you can either use silicone mixed with pigment to paint it if you want to add like red around the eyes, or red on the lips, or brown here, or whatever you want to do. Or you can even paint like makeup onto it, or like a clown makeup or something like that. The other thing you can do is punch hairs into it. The really nice thing about silicone and the fact that it's so squishy is that you can punch hairs and they will just stay inside. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments about any of the techniques, or any molding questions. There's lots of different ways to do this, but this is the way that I like it. It's very quick and easy, I think. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.